the extra who couldn't stop eating. If you asked my homeroom teacher what kind of student I was, she would say I was polite, which is a classroom synonym for harmless and forgettable. If you asked my foster mother, she would say I was well-trained, which is a living room synonym for quiet enough to sell. If you asked me, I would tell you the truth. I was hungry, all the time, in ways that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with the rules that decided who got to take up space. At Aurora Gate Academy, the rules were printed on cream paper and laminated like scripture. Skirt length, nail color, hair ribbon width, calorie count. The nutritionist in our dining hall weighed chicken the way jewelers weigh diamonds, and the girls from real families nodded as if that was civilization. I learned to smile while my stomach argued with my spine. I learned to cut cucumber into perfect squares. I learned to drink hot water when my hands shook, because hot water looked virtuous in a clear cup. I also learned to hide peanut candy, one wrapper at a time, in the back of my desk drawer, behind math worksheets I never opened. The day Rowan Wen transferred into my class, I was chewing one of those candies with the urgency of a criminal. The sugar melted against my tongue like a bribe, sweet enough to make me forget that my foster parents had scheduled my future in pencil and expected me to ink it in blood. The door slid open. Our head teacher clapped her hands, the way adults do when they want teenagers to stop being human. "Everyone, a new classmate," she announced. "Rowan Wen. He will be with us for this semester. Be welcoming." I looked up, candy still wedged in my cheek, and saw the boy the corridor had been whispering about for a week. Tall, narrow-shouldered, skin pale as winter milk, a white shirt pressed so sharply it could cut. His eyes were dark and level, the kind of eyes that didn't ask permission. He wasn't smiling, but he didn't look shy either. He looked like he had already decided the world was unreliable and would not be impressed by begging. The room did a strange thing when he stepped in. It went quiet, then loud, then quiet again, like a heart skipping. A girl in the front row stood up immediately. Daisy Tang, our class beauty, all soft hair and practiced dimples. She lifted her hand with a confident flutter. "Teacher, he can sit with me," she said, voice sweet enough to make your teeth hurt. Rowan didn't even look at her. "No," he said, as flat as a closed door. Daisy's smile froze. A dozen boys exhaled at once, shocked and secretly delighted. Our teacher cleared her throat, flustered. Her gaze searched for a spare seat, landed on the empty desk beside mine, and pointed like she was assigning a punishment. "Then sit here, next to Gia," she said quickly. "Rowan, take that seat." Of course he would sit next to me. The universe loves comedic timing. Rowan walked down the aisle and stopped at my desk. My candy was still in my mouth. I swallowed too late. The wrapper crackled softly under my palm like a confession. Rowan sat. He placed his bag down with an unhurried motion that made everyone else look messy. He didn't acknowledge me. He didn't acknowledge the classroom. He opened a notebook and began writing as if he'd been here forever. I told myself to disappear. Disappearing was what I did best. Then the air in front of my eyes shimmered. At first I thought it was my hunger making me dizzy, the way it sometimes did before lunch. But the shimmer condensed into lines of floating text, bright and stupidly cheerful, hovering over Daisy's head like a neon crown. Player 066. Route failed. More lines crawled across the ceiling like subtitles on a screen only I could see. New target. Rowan Wen. Role. Second male. Villain path. Deploy players to prevent blackening. I blinked hard. The words didn't vanish. They hung there, smug. I stared at Daisy. She had no idea there were captions judging her. She looked like a normal, humiliated teenager, which somehow made the captions feel even more obscene. My heart thumped. Am I hallucinating? I whispered to myself. Rowan's pen paused. His gaze flicked to me, sharp as a snapped wire. "Don't talk," he said quietly. Not unkind, just firm. Walls have ears. I shut up instantly. My throat went dry. The captions updated. NPC detected. Warning. Interference may alter storyline. NPC. That meant me. That meant I was officially background scenery. I stared at Rowan's hand as it moved over the page. His knuckles were clean. His nails were short. Everything about him looked controlled, yet the captions called him villain, and the atmosphere around him felt like a storm held in a bottle. By the end of first period, Daisy had run out of the room with wet eyes and perfectly intact lipstick. I watched her go, oddly sympathetic. It must be exhausting to be evaluated by everyone all the time. I should know. Rowan didn't react. He turned a page. At lunch, The nutritionist handed me a portioned tray that looked like punishment in greens and grays. I carried it back and ate slowly, letting the teacher's eyes skate over my posture, my bites, my obedience. Across the room, Rowan ate nothing. He drank water and stared at the window as if he were waiting for something to crash through it. That afternoon, a paper bag appeared on Rowan's desk. No one saw who placed it. It arrived the way rumors arrive, already in existence. The bag smelled like butter and caramel. Daisy returned, cheeks still pink, and set another bag down beside the first. She leaned close, voice trembling with determination. "Rowan, I heard you like roasted chestnuts," she said. "These are from the Westgate Bakery. They sell out fast." Rowan didn't lift his gaze. "I don't want it," he said. The classroom held its breath. Daisy's hands clenched around the bag handles. "You didn't even look," she insisted. "At least try one." Rowan finally looked up. His eyes were cold, but not cruel. They were simply tired of performances. "Take it away," he said, and his voice had the weight of an ending. Daisy's lashes fluttered. Then, like a soldier refusing to retreat, she shoved both bags forward and said, "I'll bring something else tomorrow." She fled before anyone could watch her face fall. The captions above her head screamed silently. Player 066. Persistence increased. Probability of success. Low. Rowan exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh, and then did something that made my soul leave my body. He pushed both paper bags across the shared line of our desks and nudged them toward me. "Deal with it," he said. I stared at the bags. The smell alone was a crime. My stomach made a tiny, traitorous sound. The captions flickered above my head. NPC behavior deviation. Salivation detected. My cheeks burned. I lifted my eyes and tried to look calm, as if I hadn't been dreaming about pastries the way other girls dreamed about prom. I murmured. "You mean, throw them away?" Rowan's mouth moved, barely. "It might have been a smile if you squinted. Do whatever you want," he said. "Just make them disappear." I did. Into my mouth. With enthusiasm. I waited until Rowan turned away, then peeled open the bag and bit into a chestnut pastry so warm it tasted like kindness. The crust shattered. The filling was nutty and rich, and borderline illegal. I ate like I had been starving my whole life, because I had, in slow, invisible ways. Rowan didn't comment. He didn't stop me. He just kept writing, as if my hunger was none of his business. The captions, however, lost their minds. Unexpected event. Target accepted offering from NPC. Route variance plus 12%. I chewed and read and tried not to choke. From that day on, the school ran a strange new routine. Daisy returned every morning with a different gift. Crab soup buns from the North Street stall, spicy cold noodles from a shop near the metro, glossy egg tarts, cheese rolls, flower-shaped cakes dusted in sugar. Each item arrived with a hopeful smile, a trembling confession, and a little speech about how she wouldn't give up. Each time, Rowan refused without effort. Not dramatic, not mean, just absolute. And each time, Rowan slid the untouched food across to me with the same two words, like an order and permission in one: deal with it. I became the school's most well-fed background character. Other students started watching the exchange like it was a serial drama. They pretended not to stare while their eyes devoured the scene anyway. They whispered about Rowan's arrogance, Daisy's determination, and the ridiculous luck of that foster kid who got free gourmet breakfasts. I pretended I couldn't hear. Pretending was my second language. Inside my desk, the peanut candy wrappers multiplied. On my lips, crumbs collected. In my chest, something unfamiliar stirred. The dangerous idea that I might deserve to eat. One morning, after Daisy left with another forced smile, Rowan said without looking up, "You're chewing too loudly." I froze. Pastry halfway to my mouth. Embarrassment stabbed me. "Sorry," I whispered. Rowan's pen scratched the paper. "Don't apologize," he said. So quietly I almost missed it. "Just chew slower." It was the closest thing to tenderness I'd heard from him, disguised as criticism. The captions noticed too. Target effect. Micro care expressed. Value. 0.3. Note. Possible bond. I wanted to throw the invisible subtitles out the window. Then Daisy stopped coming. It happened the way small disasters happen. Not with a bang, but with an absence. Monday arrived with no paper bag, no butter smell, no desperate smile. The room felt colder. as if the bakery had been the school's heater. I slumped over my desk and mourned, privately, the death of my unofficial breakfast sponsorship. At noon, our head teacher marched in with 2 new students behind her and an expression that said she was about to introduce a plot twist. "Transfer students," she announced. "Soline Sue and Adrian Fu. They will join us from Eastbridge School." Soline Sue entered first, chin lifted, eyes bright, uniform altered just enough to show she could bend rules without consequences. She wore gold so casually it looked like it grew from her skin. Adrian followed, tall and beautiful in a way that felt curated. He smiled at the class as if we were an audience. The captions went wild. Main lead detected, Adrian Fu. Female lead detected, Soline Sue. Player 667 online. Above Soline's head hovered bright text like a badge. Player 667. Soline's gaze swept the room, stopped on Rowan, and sharpened with interest. She walked directly to our row, ignoring empty seats like they were insults. She tapped Rowan's desk with a manicured finger. "You," she said, voice warm but commanding. "I can tell you're lonely." The classroom collectively inhaled. Even the chalk dust seemed to pause. Rowan lifted his eyes. His expression didn't change, but something in the air tightened, like a wire pulled taut. "Move," he said, not to her, but to the space between them. Soline smiled as if he had complimented her. She leaned closer. "I think the meaning of my transfer is to save you," she said, eyes shining with certainty that bordered on arrogance. "So, I'm sitting here." She looked at me then, finally, and her smile turned into an instruction. "Switch seats," she said. "You're in the way." The captions above my own head flashed again, mocking. "NPC should yield to female lead." I began stuffing my books into my bag, because I had spent years learning the fastest way to avoid being crushed under someone else's storyline. But before I could stand, Rowan's hand closed around my wrist. The contact was sudden, firm, and cold. My breath caught. "Don't," Rowan said. His voice was low, dangerous in its calm. "She doesn't decide." Soline's smile faltered for half a second. Adrian watched from the front with amused eyes, like a man enjoying a show. I stared at Rowan's fingers around my wrist, the knuckles slightly tense, the grip careful enough not to hurt. His gaze stayed on Soline, but the hold on me felt like a tether. For a ridiculous moment, I wondered if I was allowed to be anchored. Soline recovered quickly. "Interesting," she said. "So you do have preferences." Rowan released my wrist as if he had touched fire, and the coolness left my skin in a rush. "Sit where the teacher put you," he said. Soline laughed, light and sharp. "Fine," she said. "Then I'll sit across from you." Our teacher, desperate to avoid a scene, assigned Soline to Daisy's old seat and pointed at the only open spot left, the desk beside Adrian Fu. Of course. The universe loves a second punchline. I carried my bag down the aisle and sat beside Adrian, who smelled like expensive detergent and entitlement. He glanced at my name tag, eyes narrowing. "I remember you," he said. My stomach sank. "You do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Adrian's smile was thin. "Jia Lin," he said, tasting the syllables. "The vicar's foster daughter. You brought me a box of chocolates at my 17th birthday party and thought that meant you could stand near me." Heat crept up my neck. The memory hit hard. The chandelier-lit ballroom. The laughter of rich kids. My foster mother's manicured hand pressing the gift into mine like a weapon. Adrian opening it, inspecting it like trash, then dropping it on the marble floor. "Cheap," he had said then, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Even my dog has better taste." I had learned that night what my foster parents wanted. Not my happiness, not my education, but my placement. A marketable girl in a useful marriage. "I didn't think anything," I muttered. Adrian leaned back, smug. "Of course you did," he said. "Girls like you always do." The captions above his head stayed silent, which somehow made him worse. He wasn't a player. He was simply the kind of cruelty that existed naturally in rich ecosystems. Over the next week, Soline launched her campaign with theatrical energy. She appeared in Rowan's path at the stairwell, the library, the canteen. She told jokes loudly so he could hear. She placed gifts on his desk with a flourish. She spoke about loneliness like it was a perfume she could bottle. Rowan reacted the same way to everything, with polite refusal and zero interest. Soline's gifts, however, were nothing like Daisy's pastries. They were status wrapped in velvet, a key fob with a luxury logo, a deed to an apartment printed on thick paper, a folder labeled Private Island Ownership Certificate, as if reality could be bought like fiction. The classroom watched, hypnotized. My mouth fell open. I had grown up in a house that pretended to be wealthier than it was, a house where everything was curated to look expensive, while the family rankings remained humiliatingly low. Even in that world, I had never seen someone drop an island on a desk like it was a pencil case. Solene pushed the pile toward Rowan and said, voice softening as if she were confessing something holy, "These aren't bribes. They're proof that I can give you safety." The captions above the ceiling screamed, "Female lead offers resource package. Acceptance likely." Rowan looked at the pile. Then he looked at Solene. His mouth curved in a tiny, indifferent arc. He reached into my desk drawer, pulled out my backpack, and opened it like he owned it. "What are you doing?" I hissed, panicking. Rowan calmly used a tissue to pick up the key fob and the gold bars Solene had added for dramatic effect. He dropped everything into my bag with methodical care, like he was cleaning a spill. Solene stared. The class went silent to the point of pain. Rowan zipped my backpack shut and finally spoke to Solene as if she were a minor inconvenience. "My lawyer will contact your family," he said. "We'll file this as a voluntary transfer. These assets will be legally assigned to Jialin. Then you can stop performing." I nearly fainted. Solene's face turned a shade of red that didn't exist in nature. "You can't do that," she snapped. Rowan met her gaze, unblinking. "I can," he said. And I did. The captions exploded. For a while, my life ran on two ridiculous tracks. By day, I played the obedient foster daughter in an elite classroom, and by morning break, I acted as Rowan's unofficial disposal unit for other people's devotion. I learned the texture of different flowers, the geography of snack streets, the way steam clings to plastic lids. Some girls collected lip tints. I collected food scents. There were mornings when Daisy arrived with a tower of tiny dumplings shaped like rabbits, their ears pinched so neatly they looked like they came from a cartoon bakery. There were mornings when she carried a thermos of ginger soy milk and spoke softly about taking care, as if care were a spell that could be cast on a boy who did not consent. Rowan rejected every offering with the same economy of language. He never insulted Daisy, never mocked her efforts, never fed the class the cruelty it wanted. He simply refused, and refusal, in a place that worshipped attention, felt like a slap. Daisy's persistence turned into a daily ritual, and the captions treated it like a live scoreboard. Attempt 14. Emotional appeal. Result: no response. Attempt 15. Gift upgrade. Result: still no response. The subtitles always used cheerful fonts, like a children's app tracking a tragedy. The strangest part was that Rowan never looked at the floating words either. If he saw them, he never reacted. Sometimes I wondered if the captions existed only for me, as if the universe needed at least one witness to its own ridiculousness. One rainy morning, Daisy brought a bento box filled with pastel rice balls and edible flower petals. She spoke bravely about warmth and healing and being the person who stays. Rowan listened without moving, then pushed the box toward me and said, "Take it." Daisy's eyes widened, hopeful, until Rowan added, "Not because I want it, because I don't want it here." The hope on her face collapsed. She left without crying that time, which felt more dangerous than tears. When she was gone, I muttered, "You could have phrased that kinder." Rowan kept his gaze on the window. "If I phrase it kinder, she'll mistake it for a door," he said. That sentence stuck to me for days. It made me think of my foster parents, who phrased cages as opportunities, who called contracts blessings and called my silence maturity. Niceness, I was learning, was not the same as mercy. After Solene stuffed my backpack with the weight of her pride, the school treated me like I'd become radioactive. Girls stared at me like I had stolen a crown. Boys looked at my bag like it might dispense cars. Even teachers watched me with new caution, as if money in a teenager's possession could alter classroom gravity. I tried to give the backpack back to Rowan after class. "I can't take this," I whispered, holding it out like a bomb. Rowan didn't touch it. "You already did," he said. "Consider it hazard pay for being near me." "That's not funny," I hissed. Rowan's eyes flicked to mine. "I'm not joking," he said. "People throw things at me to see if I bleed. If their garbage lands on you instead, you might as well keep the salvage." I hated how practical he sounded, and I hated how the practicality made sense. Solene did not accept humiliation quietly. By the end of the week, She had begun orbiting me instead of Rowan, smiling too sweetly, asking questions with edges. "How did you get him to notice you?" she asked, as if I had a technique instead of an appetite. "Are you playing innocent on purpose?" she asked, as if innocence were a tool. Her friends started photographing me from angles that made my uniform look shorter than it was. They posted captions that implied I was greedy for more than food. Adrian pretended to disapprove, which meant he enjoyed it. One afternoon he leaned close and murmured, "You should apologize to Solene. She's not used to losing." "I'm not used to being used," I replied, and my voice surprised me with its steadiness. Adrian's expression sharpened. "Careful," he warned. "You forget how easily your life can be rearranged." He was right. My foster parents rearranged lives the way people rearrange furniture, with no concern for bruises. That night, my foster mother made me practice walking in heels across our marble hallway. She timed my steps. She corrected my smile. She told me to angle my chin so my throat looked delicate. She spoke about the Zenith Hotel as if it were a temple, and about the Wen Air as if he were a prize animal to be captured. When I hesitated, she tapped my wrist lightly with a ruler, not hard enough to leave a mark, but hard enough to remind my body who owned it. "Don't ruin this," she said, soft and lethal. "We raised you for it." In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer where I kept my peanut candies. I ate one slowly, letting the sugar soften my mouth while the fear sharpened my thoughts. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a message to Leanne, the only older foster sister whose number I still had, saved under a fake name. "Are you alive?" I typed. "Can you talk?" Her reply came 10 minutes later. "I'm alive. That's a low bar. What did they plan this time?" For the first time, I admitted I didn't want to be brave alone. The next day at school, Rowan noticed something before I could hide it. During morning reading, my hands trembled as I turned a page. Rowan's pen stalled mid-stroke. He didn't look at me directly, but his voice slid into the space between us like a thread. "You're scared," he said. I forced a laugh. "I'm always scared," I said lightly. "It's my personality." Rowan's eyes lifted, and for a heartbeat the cold surface cracked. "Not like this," he said. The words nearly broke me. "It's nothing," I lied. Rowan stared for another second, then placed a single wrapped candy on my notebook without a word. A quiet offering, small enough to deny, obvious enough to understand. I curled my fingers around it under the desk and felt my heartbeat slow by half a beat. At lunch, Solene cornered me near the vending machines and said, smiling, "Adrian told me your foster family is desperate. Is that why you cling to Rowan? Because you want to marry up?" Heat rose in my face. I wanted to slap her. Instead, I breathed in and said, "If I wanted to marry up, I'd start with someone who actually likes me." Solene's smile vanished. Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, harder than necessary. "You think you're clever," she hissed. A shadow fell over us. Rowan stood beside me, expression blank, presence suddenly heavy. Solene's grip loosened involuntarily. Rowan looked at her hand on my wrist and said, very quietly, "Let go." Solene laughed too fast and released me, stepping back as if she'd touched electricity. "You're protective," she said, trying to recover. "How adorable." Rowan didn't reply. He placed himself between us until Solene, furious and embarrassed, retreated. I stared at Rowan's shoulder. "You didn't have to," I whispered. Rowan's voice was almost inaudible. "I wanted to," he said. The captions tried to float back into my vision, but they flickered, weaker than before, like they were losing signal. Route variance escalating, system control decreasing. For the first time, I felt a strange joy at the thought that the universe might not be able to force its plot on us forever. During afternoon P.E., our coach assigned students to return equipment to the storage room. The list was random until Adrian leaned toward the coach and murmured something, smiling politely, and the coach's pen moved. "Jia Lin," the coach called. "You handle the storage room." Solene stood nearby, watching me with eyes that glinted like blades. I walked down the hallway to the storage room, my bag heavy with textbooks and invisible dread. The room smelled of dust and rubber mats. The light inside flickered like it didn't want to participate. Rowan appeared behind me, silent as shadow. "Sit," he said, pointing to an old chair in the corner. "Don't touch anything. It's filthy." "You followed me," I said, startled. Rowan didn't answer. He began organizing equipment with quick, efficient movements, as if cleaning was a language he knew. He didn't look like a boy raised in wealth. He looked like someone who learned order as survival. A gust of wind slammed the door behind us. The latch clicked. Darkness poured in, sudden and thick. The storage room's only window was high and barred. The bulb above us sputtered and died, leaving us in a dim gray strip of light leaking under the door. The air changed instantly. Rowan froze. His breathing turned uneven, sharp, like he had forgotten how to inhale. "Rowan?" I whispered. No answer. Only a rough sound, as if his throat were closing around something buried. The captions appeared, bright and gleeful, and I hated them. Scene triggered. Confined space. Target phobia activated. Female lead normally provides comfort. I wanted to scream at the ceiling. "I am not your substitute scene." I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the floor to keep the light soft. The beam revealed Rowan crouched near the wall, shoulders tight, hands clenched, eyes unfocused like he was somewhere else entirely. My heart lurched. This boy who could dismantle a rich girl's performance with one sentence looked suddenly fragile, trapped in his own body. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's just a jammed door. Someone will come. You're not alone." Rowan's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist with desperate strength. "Don't leave," he rasped. His voice didn't sound like him. It sounded like a child. I swallowed the panic in my throat. "I won't," I promised, and meant it. I dug into my pocket with my free hand and found the emergency candies I always kept hidden, because hunger doesn't respect schedules. I peeled a wrapper, the crinkle loud in the dark, and pressed the candy to Rowan's lips. "Open," I said gently. "Just taste it." Rowan hesitated, trembling. Then, like a drowning man accepting air, he let the candy in. His jaw worked slowly. The sweetness hit him, and I watched, stunned, as his breathing began to shift, a fraction less jagged. I kept talking, words spilling out to fill the room. I told him nonsense. About the cafeteria's bland soup. About my failed attempt to bake cookies in the dorm microwave. About the way Daisy's perfume smelled like peaches and regret. I talked the way you talk to a scared animal so it doesn't bolt. Rowan's grip loosened. His forehead rested, briefly, against my shoulder. The captions hovered again. Reference found. Player 001 used fruit candy to stabilize target in orphanage era. Orphanage. The word hit a place behind my eyes, like a locked drawer rattling. "I was in an orphanage," I blurted without thinking. Rowan's head lifted slightly. In the dim light, his eyes sharpened. "What did you say?" he asked. I swallowed. "Before the Vickers," I whispered. "I don't remember much. I hit my head when I was around 10. Everything before that is blank." Rowan stared at me as if he were trying to see through fog. His breathing was steadier now, but his face looked haunted. The door rattled, voices outside. A teacher's key scraped the lock. Light flooded in as the door swung open, and the normal world came roaring back, loud and careless. Rowan stood abruptly, his expression sealing shut like a vault. He didn't let anyone see what had happened. I wanted to ask him 1,000 questions. I wanted to ask why he feared darkness, why he knew my name in a room full of people, why his hand on my wrist felt like something remembered. But the day kept moving, because days do that, no matter what hearts are breaking underneath. That evening, a small paper bag appeared on my desk. Not Daisy's, not Soline's. This one was plain, stapled shut, with no note. Inside were 2 warm almond croissants and a small cup of ginger honey coffee. The smell rolled over me like a wave. My eyes burned suddenly, ridiculously. Rowan sat beside me, looking forward, not at me. "Daisy isn't coming anymore," he said flatly. I clutched the bag. "I noticed," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. Rowan's gaze stayed on the blackboard. "Eat," he said. "You look pale." I laughed once, sharp and helpless. "That's your solution to everything," I murmured. Rowan's mouth tightened. "Food is honest," he said. "People are not." I wanted to tell him my foster parents' plan. I wanted to warn him. I wanted to ask him to run, or to help me run. But the words stuck, heavy with shame. The idea of being used as bait to drug him made my skin crawl. So I said nothing. At home, my foster mother placed the nightdress on my bed like an order. Silk, pale, innocent-looking. A costume for a crime. I waited until the house slept. Then I packed what I could. My phone, my school ID, a few clothes, my notebook filled with secret sketches, and the absurd backpack of Soline's transferred wealth. I paused in front of the mirror and stared at my own face, wondering what kind of girl was brave enough to disappear. In the kitchen, I found my foster father's safe behind a framed family photo. I knew the code. I had been taught to know things that made me useful. Inside were documents, contracts, and a USB drive, labeled with a careless arrogance. Marriage assets. I took it. I didn't feel heroic. I felt sick. At dawn, I arrived at school early and walked to the back fence, where the maintenance path ran between tall hedges. My hands shook on the metal bars. For a second, I hesitated, thinking of the price of disobedience. Then I remembered my foster father's calm voice saying transaction, and my body moved. I climbed. The drop on the other side was not far, but the jump felt like a lifetime. I landed hard, knees jolting, and bit back a cry. On the path beyond the fence, a silver van waited with its engine running. The driver stepped out, a woman in her 20s with a scar near her eyebrow and eyes that held the kind of exhaustion you only earn. I recognized her instantly. Leanne, one of the older foster daughters who had been married out years earlier. "You finally decided," she said, voice dry. My throat tightened. "How did you know I'd run?" I asked. Leanne shrugged. "Because I wished someone had told me I could," she said. Then she opened the passenger door. "Get in, before they notice you're gone." Inside the van, the air smelled like peppermint gum and gasoline. Leanne drove us toward the airport without asking me to explain. She didn't need the story. She knew the script. As the city thinned into highway, I stared at my hands and whispered, "I don't want to ruin him." Leanne glanced at me. "Who?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Rowan," I said. Leanne's jaw tightened. "The Wenair," she said. "So that's why they rushed the banquet." My stomach dropped. "You know him?" I asked. "I know of him," Leanne replied. "The Wens have money and enemies. Your foster parents wanted a child tied to that name, because names can be used like shields." I pressed the USB drive against my palm until it hurt. "I took evidence," I said. "About them. About what they've done." Leanne nodded once. "Good," she said. "Then we don't just run. We bite back." We flew to a coastal town where the sea was gray-blue and honest, where no one knew the Vickers and no one cared about academy rankings. We rented a small wooden house with a kitchen that smelled like salt and sunlight. I learned to cook without measuring, which felt like rebellion. I ate until my stomach stopped fearing scarcity. I drew designs for jewelry in my notebook and watched them become real under Leanne's patient hands, because Leanne had learned a trade after escaping her marriage, and she refused to let me be helpless. A week later, we sent the files, not to gossip blogs, not to rival families, but to the anti-corruption office and the media outlets brave enough to print names. The documents were ugly and detailed. They spoke of coerced marriages, forged medical records, bribes, hush money, and girls traded like stocks. The Vickers world cracked. 2 days after the first article broke, an encrypted email appeared in my inbox from an address that looked like a random string of numbers. The subject line was plain: "Regarding the transferred assets." My fingers hovered over the screen, suspicious. Then I opened it anyway. The message was brief and brutally formal. A law firm confirmed that the items Soline had shoved at Rowan had been processed exactly as he promised, filed as a voluntary gift transfer with notarized statements, and placed into an escrow account under my name until I reached legal adulthood. The final line was the only one that felt human. "Use it to stay safe. Do not return to the Vickers. Do not answer unknown calls. Eat something warm." I read that last instruction until my vision blurred. It sounded like Rowan, hiding concern inside commands. Leanne read it over my shoulder and snorted. "He writes like a boy who never got to ask nicely," she said, then ruffled my hair the way no one in the Vickers house ever had. "Good, let him be awkward. At least he is trying." With the escrow money, we paid 3 months of rent up front, so the landlord couldn't threaten us with sudden eviction. I bought a second-hand soldering station for jewelry work and a cheap set of files that turned my fingertips raw. Leanne taught me how to shape metal without cracking it, how to polish until light runs smoothly, how to throw away a design that doesn't fit and start again without calling it failure. On weekends, we set up a small table at the harbor market. Tourists picked up my first clumsy pendants and asked what the patterns meant. I told them they were waves, which was true, and also that they were escape routes, which was truer. At night, when my hands ached, I ate noodles on the porch and listened to the sea. Sometimes I caught myself glancing up, half expecting captions to return, and felt a quiet thrill when nothing floated there. Freedom, I realized, is also the absence of being narrated. The headlines arrived like distant thunder. Investigation, arrest, frozen assets, a photo of my foster father being escorted into a car with his face twisted in disbelief. My foster mother, pale and furious, hiding behind sunglasses that couldn't hide her shame. I sat in the seaside cafe and watched the news without joy. I felt only a slow, cold relief, like a knot loosening after years. Soline's name appeared in a different article, one I didn't seek out but couldn't avoid. She had been hospitalized after an episode on campus, screaming about roots and resetting the plot, her family insisting it was stress. Adrian's family holdings plummeted when his father's illegal accounts surfaced in the same investigation chain, like dominoes falling in expensive suits. The captions never appeared in my vision anymore. Maybe the system had lost interest once I left its stage. Maybe it had been a fever dream born from hunger and fear. Or maybe I had simply stepped out of range. Then, in late summer, memory returned like a tide. It started with small flashes, the smell of rain on concrete, the taste of grape candy, a boy's hand tying my shoelace with clumsy patience, a dim room with too many beds, a staff member shouting, a window with bars. One night, I dreamed of a child version of myself, hair chopped short, cheeks sticky with sugar, offering candy to a silent boy who sat in the corner like he didn't believe in being chosen. "Eat," Tiny Me said, holding out the sweet. "If you eat, you won't be scared." The boy's eyes were dark, older than his face, and he took the candy slowly, as if accepting a promise. When I woke, my pillow was wet. I remembered the orphanage. I remembered Rowan. I remembered the day the Vickers came to adopt me, how I clung to Rowan's sleeve and refused to let go. I remembered being yanked, my head striking a doorframe, the bright shock of pain, and then nothing. I had forgotten him. He had not forgotten me. I sat on the porch of our seaside house and stared at the horizon until the sky turned pink. Leanne watched me quietly. "You finally got it back," she said. "I left him," I whispered, and the guilt tasted like iron. Leanne snorted. "You saved yourself," she corrected. "And if he's as smart as people say, he saved himself too." I wanted to believe her. Still, on nights when the wind rattled the windows, I pictured Rowan in a dark room, hand on a door, breath trapped, and my chest ached. A month later, I received an email from a university admissions office. I had applied with my exam scores and a portfolio of jewelry designs Leanne helped me assemble. I expected rejection. Instead, the email said, "Accepted. Scholarship offered. Major, industrial design. Jewelry." I sat at the kitchen table and laughed until I cried. Leanne squeezed my shoulder and said, "See? You can be the lead in your own life." On orientation day, I walked under a row of plane trees on campus, my backpack light for the first time. Sunlight filtered through leaves, painting the path with shifting gold. Students hurried past in clusters, excited, nervous, alive. At the far end of the walkway, a familiar figure stood near the fountain. Rowan Wen wore a simple dark jacket and no visible luxury. His hair was slightly longer, falling into his eyes the way it used to in class. He looked thinner, like he had spent months fighting invisible battles, but his posture was steady. When he saw me, his gaze softened in a way that made my throat close. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He simply walked toward me, each step measured, as if giving me room to run if I wanted. I stopped breathing. Rowan stopped a few feet away. In the bright campus light, his eyes looked less like winter and more like deep water. "You jumped the fence," he said, and his voice carried a quiet relief that made the words shake. I swallowed hard. "I did," I answered. Rowan's gaze flicked to my hands, then to my face. "I found your desk empty," he said. I asked the teacher. I asked the security guard. I asked people who didn't deserve my questions. No one told me anything. I flinched. "I'm sorry," I whispered, then corrected myself, remembering his earlier instruction. "No, I'm not sorry I left. I'm sorry I didn't warn you." Rowan's mouth tightened. "You were trying to keep me clean," he said, as if naming my thought. "You thought if you carried the dirt alone, I'd stay untouched." I stared at him. How did you know? I asked. Rowan's eyes darkened with something like grief and fondness tangled together. Because you always do that, he said. Even when you were 3, my lungs seized, the world tilted. You remember, I breathed. Rowan nodded once. I remembered everything, he said. I just didn't know if you ever would. For a moment, the campus noise faded into a distant hum. There was only the space between us, full of years and sugar and fear. Rowan reached into his pocket and held out a small candy. Grape flavor, wrapped in clear plastic. I laughed, a broken sound. You're ridiculous, I said. Rowan's eyes softened further. Eat, he told me, almost gruffly. It's honest. I took the candy. My fingers brushed his, and the contact was warm, not cold. I unwrapped it and placed it on my tongue, and the familiar sweetness unlocked the last stubborn door inside my head. Rowan exhaled, slow. Good, he said.